The Broad Perspective Network is not responsible for the content of the following program. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. We're glad you're with us today. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Greg Barnes.
I'm Kevin Lawson.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
And today is no different than any other day, but we really do have a lot we want to talk about. There's so much going on. Something that we wanted to carry over from our previous show, we want to talk just a little bit more about corporate incentives with public money. We want to touch on that. We also want to talk about some of the things that are going on with the recent school shootings. We want to talk about video games. How impactful are they really on kids' behaviors? There is a lot, and we're also going to save the last section for finance because there's a lot going on in the financial world as well. So let's kick it off then with what's happening with corporate public money. Do these incentives that these corporations are asking for cities to put out for them to relocate their business or to build their next sports stadium in those cities, do they pay off? And I think that it's an important question because there's a lot of money being thrown around, because the bottom line is, if it doesn't pay off, who actually foots the bill for that? And that is us. That is you and me. The taxpayers are actually paying for these incentives. And we elect these people to do the right thing, but I think they all get all excited because they hear the word jobs and they have these pie in the sky ideas of what's actually going to happen, and yet they don't have their fingers on the touch of reality. Corporations are going to get what they can, period. They're going to make promises that they probably have no intention of keeping. Amazon doing 50,000 jobs that pay $100,000 a year, I would be so skeptical of that because I guarantee you most of them are going to be filled by AI and robotics. I just don't see it, but these folks that are frothing at the bit, looking at all the jobs and all the income that will bring in, really don't have their finger on the pulse of reality. So that's my take on it. What do you guys think about this?
Well, I think, and I would love to encourage everyone to look at this from this perspective. When we talk about these incentives that cities are giving corporations to come into their city to do business, these incentive programs are nothing more than financial instruments. It is really structured just like a municipal bond, except for it's a corporate bond. And when you think of it from that perspective, who buys corporate bonds? Well, it's normally private investors or annuities, hedge funds, and money market accounts. That's who buys corporate bonds. So if the idea is such a great idea, why aren't those same normal investors interested in the project? And I think that tells us all exactly what's going on.
That's very true. Just a little bit of trivia. Amazon has already received more than $1 billion. Billion, that's B. Billion, million with a B. In incentives from 129 communities to build distribution centers and data farms that were needed to be built anyway. But they got $1 billion in incentives, and so some of these folks that are much more in tune and educated on this than I certainly am said a better use of the incentives might be to encourage them to go to cities that are depressed, that have lost so much of their labor force, to go to a city that needs them, and also employ reformed ex-cons who can't find work. Spend public money to do things that are actually worthy of the incentives. And so far, they're not. It's not panning out, and it falls on the backs of us. They have not found one example where this has paid off. Not one example.
Well, you raised an excellent question. Is that you said, why don't they go to underserved communities? Mm-hmm. And it's because they're broke. They can't raise the funds.
The incentives, exactly.
They can't raise the funds to pay the incentives,
right.
So the formula doesn't work.
Exactly.
So they have to go to an affluent community where the tax base is higher with a better rate of return, and then the project makes sense.
Well, just like this article speaks to the fact of the stadium spending spree, you really should go read this article. On the average, taxpayers assume 78% of the cost of these sports stadiums.
Right.
If you just looked at that fact alone, most cities wouldn't want these in their communities.
Right.
They wouldn't want them, knowing that's a lot of money that isn't going to other things that community probably needs far more than a sports stadium.
And there's not
putting sports stadiums
Right,
down,
right.
Okay, but the numbers don't work.
No, and it's not been a trickle down. Go ahead, Kev.
Well, we have to look at this in a political aspect. I think that the politicians are a lot of ways responsible because they want voters, and if voters are really hellbound on, say, a sports team, they're going to want to keep that sports team there. I mean, you have the example of, say, the San Diego Chargers, where the San Diego Chargers threatened San Diego that, hey, we're going to leave if you don't come up with X amount of dollars. And, of course, the mayor at the time was against it. Well, it went down to the point where they actually tasered the mayor to get money for donations. And this man actually got tasered. So a lot of people don't understand that it is a big deal when it comes to votes. These sports teams and these jobs that we're talking about, when you have a impoverished city, you want jobs. So the first thing as a politician is, okay, well, I'm going to bring you more jobs. Well, here's the backside of that coin. The backside of that coin is, hey, we're bringing Amazon in, we're bringing this sports team in, and there's really no jobs for you. It's just that I told you it's 50,000 jobs. So when the election comes, you vote for me. I'm just not going to tell you the truth that you're really not going to be hired.
There's 50,000 robots.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is the tragedy of all this, because everybody gets excited and they look at the promises that are made and they're going, oh, that would be so great, because it's the trickle down theory. You know, they're gonna have these 50,000 high paying jobs, and therefore my business, I sell TVs or I sell cars or I sell what have you. Those 50,000 people are going to be buying my product. Therefore, I'm going to profit as well. But it doesn't happen like that. And so far, in all the research that I've been doing, there's not been really one case study where it has benefited a community.
No, actually, they drain the community
Exactly.
in a lot of different
Yes,
ways.
they do.
They drain the community's resources. They actually raise taxes on the people that surround the stadiums because of the fact that there is really no space. We have to think about some of the stadiums we're building even here in California. I mean, you have to clear a lot of land in order to build a stadium just in itself. So when you look at places like Amazon, which is a major corporation, it's not your regular office building with 12, 13 rooms. This is a massive warehouse where there's going to be a lot of space needed. And you have to look at who is losing out on the space where these houses could have go, where these low-income houses could have went, where maybe apartments could have been set for affordable health or affordable housing. Hospitals could have been built. A lot of people are not looking at what could have been in place instead of. They're looking at, like you said, the benefit of, jobs. And I think that our economy is focused on how can I make do rather than what's going to be best for us in the future.
Exactly. And see, the reason that I thought it was important to talk about this again is because the John Q taxpayer isn't aware of this. All they hear is 50,000 jobs, incentives in a community, or 1,000 jobs, or 400 jobs. It doesn't matter what it is.
I don't think any stadium. Okay, go ahead, finish.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, it doesn't matter what it is. That is what John Q. Public hears, is this is going to be this windfall, this benefit, this huge, awesome thing to these communities. And so far, it has not paid off, and we all know communities who have hit the bullet on this.
And we keep falling for it.
Right.
We hear the 50,000 jobs and we say, yay, hooray, hooray, and we vote for things, but no stadium has ever brought in 50,000 jobs, ever.
Well, the stadiums have never promised 50,000 jobs. That's
Well,
Amazon.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you for straightening out.
Right.
I got my figures mixed up.
No, that's
but,
okay.
But we have a stadium here, and I love going to it, and I love watching the games and the fun, but I know people that have actually gone to apply for jobs. They're all minimum wage jobs, and they're all part-time.
Right, exactly. It's not brought in the income that we would hope it would.
How much
Or
did
the
it
jobs.
cost the city for those
that's a good question.
for those handful of part-time
I don't know
minimum
the
wage
answer to
jobs?
that.
Well, part of those promises in the jobs go to existing infrastructure. There'll be more hotel occupation. There'll be more restaurant attendance. There'll be more movie attendance, like after the sports activity or whatever. There'll be more parking revenues.
Those are all minimum wage jobs.
Yes, but there are more jobs. That's how they sell this whole program to us. Is there more jobs, more jobs, more jobs, but none of these are sustainable living jobs. And that's the word game in the salesmanship of the marketing of the financial instrument that is a future investment, just like the stock market.
Sounds to me like we need to start dialing down specifics and guarantees when we have these things come into communities.
And I like the word you used, is guaranteed. They never use that word.
No, they don't.
Because this is just like the stock market. These are gambles on the future, expectations built on projections and hypotheses and formulas of how the future will be. But if anything throws a monkey wrench in that program, the project goes down the drain.
I think it's more of a manipulation tactic. I mean, when you really look at what it is, these people are manipulating a way to spend your money and keep theirs. Mm-hmm. And that's simple business. If I don't have to spend my money, I'm not going to. Investors tell you that all the time. Why spend your money when you can spend somebody else's?
Exactly.
These people are business investors, and what they're doing is they're manipulating people that don't know so that they can accomplish their objective for the cheapest price possible. Well, what's cheaper than free? Nothing. So when we look at all of these jobs, like you said, we could take the example of, say, the Forum in Inglewood, for example. It's built right across the street from a cemetery, and a lot of people that are tourists would never know that. Here it is, you're built right across the street from a cemetery. So what was there before the Forum? That's what we're not looking at. We're not looking at the fact that a lot of these jobs that they're talking about are in-house companies, and these are massive hires where they tell you in the newspaper or wherever else they advertise, we're going to hire 500 people. And then they go on a hiring freeze for the next 6 to 12 years. You know, it's just common sense. Hey, we're going to hire 500 people from your community so that you guys can chant about how they are hiring, and then we're going to freeze. Well, we all know that it takes well over 500 people to run a stadium. We know that for a fact. There is no stadium, not Angel Stadium, not Dodger Stadium, not San Diego Charger Stadium, no stadium or even a business that you can run with 500 people with a corporation like Amazon. I mean, they're even going to the lengths of hiring independent contractors to deliver their packages. So if they really had the resources in order to deliver without outsourcing, we would need more than 500 people. They do not have the resources because of the fact that they're manipulating the people in order to get them to think that we're going to hire all of you, when in fact we're going to hire 0.01% of you and say we love you and just drain you completely until you don't want us anymore. And even when you don't want us anymore, then we're going to threaten to leave and leave you with the debt that we're leaving with.
And we're making you pay for whatever this business was too by the incentives that your city agreed to.
That is one of the stories. I think it's the cities that are, I'm going to say Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. Those two communities have provided incentives to certain companies, and once the Kansas City, Kansas part of that company exhausted their incentives, then they enticed the Missouri portion to give them incentives, and they moved across the river to Missouri and then played this game back and forth. So it's corporate ping pong.
And those cities lost out in hundreds of millions of dollars in lost tax revenue by being the pickle in the middle of this game
and being played. In essence, they're being played.
So basically, both towns, they just moved their jobs back and forth across the border line. There were no real jobs created.
They're the same. They're the same workers, I would assume. But there's a lot to this, and it's important for the listeners that are involved in communities that are going down this road to pay attention and voice their opinion. However, having said that, it'll lead to another point of discussion, is opinions necessarily are not valid because we want to talk about bots or not, because we're finding that bots are being employed to stress opinions. So corporations can have bots influence political decisions. We need to also focus on that. When does speaking up really count, and when is it really authentic? And when we come back with our next section, we will address that because it's very significant. And again, a lot going on. Pay attention to what your community, if you're living in a community that's looking at providing these incentives, please talk to the people in charge and voice your opinion and say, I really want assurance that they're going to come through, because the experience has been that it never has.
Go talk to a city that's been through this experience, say 10 years down the line or 20 years down the line.
Most of them won't fess up, but once again, it's still on the backs of the taxpayers. So pay attention, get active. We'll be right back with more of The Broad Perspective. Stay tuned.
Hello, I am His Majesty the Soul, King of Mauritius, and I invite you to help me build the world's planetary egg, an ecological geophysical galleon. It's approximately 180 acres, and it is home to 3,000 researchers from around the world. It is the world's first sovereign, planetary, independent jurisdiction that has the capability of advancing and progressing and fast-tracking every aspect of innovation, helping us redefine what it means to be human in a new world. So check out our website. It's www.mauricii.com. MORACEAE.com. I look forward to seeing you, and please contribute, donate to the GoFundMe page. I look forward to meeting you, and let's build the planetary egg. Thank you.
Welcome back to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Greg Barnes.
I'm Kevin Lawson.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
We're going to jump into another subject that ties into the first one and will move us on to the others, and it's to bot or not bot. And when I say bots, we're talking little software bits that communicate. And the story I listened to yesterday on the radio was a man who was a corporate head, and for whatever reason he was being interviewed for some sort of clearance, I guess government clearance, what have you. And so they're asking him questions. Is this your name? Yes. Are you a CEO of this corporation? Yes. Asking him other personal questions. Yes. Did you recently write this letter to the FCC saying that you supported removing net neutrality? No, I did not. They read the letter to him. His name signed on it. No, I did not do that. So he was very annoyed. Did some research, found out, yes, bots. And so the FCC has been bombarded with people using our, and I'm going to say probably our names, because, you know, your email's getting hacked all the time. I know, Greg, your daughter's, I get emails from her all the time, which is not hers. And so they're using us to send these bots to influence opinions on major issues. So the FCC has been bombarded with bots saying, yes, do away with net neutrality. Now, we did a show on the Broad Perspective recently about net neutrality. The consensus of the people here in this studio felt that keeping net neutrality was beneficial to the people. And so we encouraged everybody to write into the FCC, send them an email or whatever, and say, keep net neutrality. Okay, well, that would be good if we did that. However, they're being flooded with emails that say something different. Get rid of net neutrality, but now I don't know if they're finding, but we're finding, and research is showing that those are not legitimate viewpoints. How often are things being influenced by bots?
Well, I want to interject into the conversation for clarity purposes. When we're talking about these bots, we're not talking about physical robots. No. We're talking about artificial intelligence algorithms that have the ability to calculate, figure out, hold conversations, interpret, respond, do all the things that a human being would do on the internet. And what we've done with our acceptance and embracing of technology is we've given those algorithms, those bots, the ability to mimic us.
Right.
They can steal our email addresses. They can steal our electronic signatures. and they can produce things just as we would.
It was
But
us.
it's an artificial intelligence being directed by those that are in charge of them.
So bots are now the biggest purveyors of fake news on the planet.
That is correct.
And fake information, right?
Fake information.
And I don't care what side of the fence you're on. I mean, I really don't know, because how can we trust any of it?
But so many people are influenced by
Right.
what we think
Now-
social media is telling us.
Exactly. And bots are not necessarily negative. The bots have a great purpose, and if they're used with the right intention, and most of the time they are, it's important. I mean, we use them in our financial beings. We use them in a lot of ways. But when they're used in this nefarious way to influence policy, to influence public policy, we all pay. And it's significant. Go ahead, Kev.
The corporations must be doing something or must know something. I mean, we have lobbyists and different things that are manipulating, again, politics.
Mm-hmm.
We know that politics is manipulated through votes and or the people.
Mm-hmm.
If I was to repeal net neutrality, which is not something we wanted here on the broad perspective, but if I had the agenda to repeal it and had the power and the knowledge and the know-how, what's to keep me from giving my technical resources few extra 100,000 or tens of thousands or whatever bonus incentive that I may give to them for whatever the purpose to add this to our political agenda? We do know that different news networks are, funded by different sets of lobbyists,
Exactly.
whether Republican or
Mhm.
Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering how many of the corporations that would be for net neutrality, if we did our homework and we really dug into it, how many of them will we find that are using their technical resources to program bots into our systems? Because we all know that when you apply for anything nowadays, job, house, car, everything goes on a database, and you get telemarketers calling out of this world, and you go on these big lists, and you got to go through headache to get off the list. So it's not hard to get your information.
Right.
It's very easy to get your information. As a matter of fact, it's sent pretty much worldwide.
Right.
And who, again, would be the contributing factors of these bots?
Follow the money.
Yeah, just you follow the source. This particular story, the gentleman, when the investigator read him the letter back, it was a well-written letter, and he said, I could have written that letter. I mean, it was well done. It looked professional, very believable, but he said it wasn't me, because that is not the stance I take. And so man, I mean, how frequently is this happening? And how would the FCC know? They're going, oh man, I'm getting all these emails from people, and we're ranking that this is a person for and this is a person against, and so on and so forth. But this being manipulative, so a decision's going to make that really is not reflecting the truth of what people want.
And we have to remember, it's hidden in the codes. Everything
Yes.
dealing with computer is a code. And,
Right.
and the computers and these bots are only registering 1 and 0. Nothing else. No matter what you write, what you see, what you hear comes off the computer. A computer registers it as 1
Binary.
and 0. So even if we went and backtracked it, again, how many of us would understand the coding? And then how sophisticated are our coders getting? We're getting firewalls that are being hacked every day, and we all know that the FBI and the CIA, they have a known practice where if anybody hacks them, they
Right.
immediately give them a job and ask how they did it and pay them very handsomely so that they can not do it again or not go through the problem again. So again, I would ask, who's going to understand the code? Who's going to break the code? We could follow the money all we want, but I'll give the example of Bernie Madoff for that following the money trick. Here's $80 billion of our economy down the drain. Why? Because a man understood code well enough to hide it from the FBI, who had been investigating the 20 out of the 30 years that he had been performing this service, if you will.
Right.
So it does get secretive.
You know, we have a trendy thing going on right now, something called algorithms, and we believe that if you can create an algorithm for something, it must be valid. Well, it may be valid. That doesn't mean it's not underhanded. You can create an algorithm to produce whatever result you want to produce. So we have algorithms, we have bots, and we have AI right now, and our collective human voices are being drowned out right
Yes.
now. This is something you need to get angry about.
Well, we all need to understand this is another warning shot across the brow of how dangerous artificial intelligence is. Because for all we know, the subject we're talking about, this could be a mastermind of artificial intelligence where it is beginning to manipulate governments for its own interest.
Yeah.
And I think that regardless of how you want to look at this position, the problem with AI self-learning is we already know it can self-create. So if it can self-learn and self-create, this is something that nightmares are made out of.
Well, and this is go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, those two abilities alone eliminate control. Us
there is
controlling
no control.
them, there is none anymore.
Yeah.
And you see, what this is so significant to me because we think we have an opinion that is backed by a set of facts. All of us think that. We all have our own ideology, whatever you want to call it, but whatever. We all have our set of beliefs. And we think that we do our research. We think we have facts to back them up. But what we're finding now is we don't. Facts are when can we what is a fact? What is a fact and when is it influenced and by what? Anymore, what can we believe? How do we know the truth of anything? And people say, well, there is the truth, there's the truth, and then there's that pseudo-truth or whatever. I'm saying it's getting harder and harder and harder to figure out.
Just yesterday, I read on the internet 2 different studies. One said, you'll live long if you drink alcohol. The other one said, you won't live long if you drink alcohol.
Exactly.
Come on.
I know. It's
There's-
conflicting information constantly.
Correlation does not prove causation, folks.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we have to remember that belief is an opinionated fact.
Yes.
Belief is a very opinionated fact, and we see it a lot with, again, any stance that you take, whether it be religion, politics, sports. It's all opinionated fact.
Right.
And we'll just stick with sports because it's something easy that people can understand. We're seeing the opinionated fact, simple and plain. My team is better than your team. This is the reasons why. This is now turning into brawls.
Right.
This is now turning into public violence because of my team is better than your team. We see the example of the Giants fan that was beaten at the Dodgers game. We saw the example of the UFC fighting UCLA. We see all these different examples of beliefs, and we have to understand that, like you said, robotics is, or AI, as you guys are putting it, is getting to the point of learning. And when it's learning, there's only one way you can correct it because it's a virus.
Right.
So we are the virus. We created the virus, and now we're putting viruses in the system to stop the virus. But as it learns, just like human antibodies learn, it's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And Greg made a very valid point of how do we know that this is not AI actually manipulating things for its personal gain. We don't really understand net neutrality from the inside out.
Right.
Being those ones and zeros.
Right.
That would be the people that's placing the ones and zeros there for us.
Right.
So is it a virus that is learning from itself and we're trying to stop it, or is it a virus that is trying to stop itself because we've poisoned something in the system and we don't see it yet?
As AI learns about human beings, what it learns is we're prone to competition and we will compete with each other. And again, I mean, goes back a ways. Game theory is you don't have to get in a war with anybody if you can get 2 other opponents to cancel each other out. You don't even have to get your hands dirty. AI is going to learn that about us too, if it hasn't already, and I'm sure it has, that it can win just by not playing the game and getting us to not communicate and to fight and argue amongst ourselves.
Well, human nature is always wanting more.
Right.
Desire is to want more. To desire anything is to want more, and it's just that simple. So when you say to cancel each other out, it's to get more. No country or empire has ever been lost at its height. Meaning Persia was only able to conquer as much as it was because it was at its height. Hitler was only able to conquer as much as he was because they were at their height. America at its height. When a country dwindles, only then is it really attacked and taken over and used and abused and just completely just misled all the way around because they're at a point where you can't do anything about it. You don't have the money, you don't have the resources, and it's the same with bots. They're seeing that We don't have the money to stop them. We don't have the resources to stop them.
Or the knowledge on how to.
And I was just about to say that. Or the knowledge on ones and zeros.
Go for it, Greg.
I was just going to say that, speaking on the tactical plane that you're on right now, is that the best way to demotivate an enemy is to get it to be disorganized. And I think that is what's starting to happen with information, because information is the number one commodity in the world right now. If you can get people to no longer trust information, then they become disoriented and they have no motivations to seek out what is real. And that's how we fall completely into the matrix, where we don't know what is real anymore, and therefore whatever reality is presented to us, that becomes our reality.
Exactly, and we allow our gullibility, our need to be validated in our ideology to transcend anything that might or might not be true. I think that a healthy dose of skepticism on every plane is now warranted, and that's unfortunate, but it is the way it is. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more of the broad perspective, and we'll be tackling even another issue here in just a moment. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The 12th hour.
A show literally about everything.
Everything.
A candid discussion between friends about their different perspectives on what they think may be going on.
Or what is not going on.
With so many different areas of information being given out, we attempt to put together the puzzle pieces to create the broad perspective of the whole picture.
Welcome back to The Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Greg Barnes.
I'm Kevin Lawson.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
And our previous section, we were talking about bots and how they influence decisions and choices that we all have to live with, and yet they may not be reflecting the people, and they're presenting a lot of, occasionally or frequently, bad information. Greg has another thing he wanted to talk about, the melding of artificial intelligence and humanity. I think that's what you're referring to, Greg.
Yes. In February of 2017, there was a huge forum that was held. It was a 2-day forum where like 14 different institutions and colleges all came together to talk about the pros and cons of artificial intelligence. And while acknowledging that artificial intelligence had all these benefits, their main focus was on how everyone is ignoring the potential for malicious behavior from artificial intelligence, and that there was no oversight or rule making going into place as artificial intelligence was developing. And piggybacking on what we talked about earlier, it started to talk about at the forum how the new forms of attacks the new threats that artificial intelligence are imposing. And here's just a couple of them right here, where it talked about cyber attacks increasing, automated hacking, spear phishing, speech synthesis, impersonations, and data poisoning. And this is exactly what we talked about. This bot impersonated that senator or congressperson,
Right.
fabricated information, and then poisoned the data and just sent it out, right? With the purpose of poisoning data,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because it wanted to skew the statistics on whether or not the public wanted net neutrality or if it wanted to keep it.
Right. Now, I want to say the bot itself really doesn't care. The bot itself has no emotion or objective or anything.
It's doing what it was programmed to do.
Exactly.
Well, actually, that's an incorrect statement
Okay.
on both.
Okay.
It does have motivation.
Okay.
because it's self-aware.
Okay.
It has decided.
It is now, yes.
Yeah, it has decided its objectives and what it wants to do based on all the things it has learned already. And it is no longer just doing what it's programmed to do, it's doing what it has learned to do. And that isn't necessarily a good thing because, again, it is pretty much in its infant stage. However, because of its quantum physics computing abilities, it is learning from every single person on the planet every second of the day, every year, every decade.
And unfortunately, it's also learning from people that don't have a good moral compass, but it's also learning from people that do.
Yes.
So it's getting a lot of gray information. I don't know what else to call it except
That
gray
would be
information.
that would be a very good wording of it all. It's getting a lot of gray information, but gray information isn't necessarily on one side or the other in terms of being pure evil or being pure good.
I agree.
So at the end of that conference, with all those experts that were there, what was the collective takeaway from it, Greg?
The collective takeaway that I got from it was that the corporations that are developing this have to take the blinders off, because they're like kids in a candy store saying, look what I can do, look what I can do. Or better yet, a new kid at the playground, look what I can do, look what I can do. But they're not considering the dangers of, if I fall off of this, monkey bars apparatus and it's 20 stories down, right? What's going to happen to me if I fall? They're not considering any of that at all.
It's like giving a playground full of toddlers handguns.
Exactly.
Say, look what I can do.
And they're having lots of fun, but no one's gotten shot yet.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of ammunition all over the place. But what are we going to do if someone gets shot? Those are the things that are not in place. There's no emergency. There's no ER. There's no provisions set aside for what happens if artificial intelligence goes rogue. There's nothing in place at all.
There's plenty of
There's
movies
nothing
that address that.
As a fan of science fiction, as a kid, I read a lot of Isaac Asimov, and he talks about the rules of robotics and stuff. And I don't think we've seen any of those rules of robotics that so many science fiction writers put in their stories. It's not happening, and it hasn't happened
It's not
from
that we
the beginning.
see, yeah, for sure,
Yes.
for sure. So keep that in mind. I want to take this to a different direction now. One of the things we're hearing on the news, it's kind of different in some ways, a lot, is that there's a lot of blame. We've had another school shooting, which happened previous to this recording, but there's a lot of blame going around. They can blame guns, the availability of guns, what have you. I hear a lot of people are blaming this behavior on video games. I was listening to some senators talk about that. I know my kids play video games, and most kids I know play video games. Now, there's some that are more graphic and more violent than others. But I think just from the sheer number of kids that do play those video games and don't go out and commit these crimes, you have to ask yourself, is that really a valid concern? Because now they're talking about increasing the age that people can buy them and play them. And I'm just wondering what you guys think. Is that a contributory factor to this violence that we're seeing in our schools?
I don't believe it is.
You don't believe it is? Okay.
No, it's not. It's not a contributing factor, because just like a rated R movie has an age limit, 17 and up, in order for you to go see it without your parents, it's the same way with these video games. The only difference is they changed the R to an M and say rated mature, but it's still the same age requirement. You have to be 17 or older to go buy that game or play that game. It is recommended that your parents be with you if you're playing the game. So if you're under 17, they're saying you might be a little bit too immature to understand that this is just a video game. So if, again, we're going to blame the video games, and let's look at those that are playing them. Are they too young to be playing the game?
Or the parents that are allowing them.
Okay, the parents are the ones buying them, because a 6-year-old can't go buy Call of Duty.
This is true.
I don't care if he's got $120. He can't go buy Call of Duty.
I don't know if this is any different, the argument, than we had when I was a teenager. Violent movies. Is that making violent kids? A violent rock and roll. Is that making kids violent? Violent television.
That is my whole point. Through every generation, no matter what, they've always found some reason or something else to blame other than what is the fact. We are breeding this kind of behavior. We cannot keep blaming other than ourselves. When a kid loses his mother, we'll just talk about the most recent school shooting. When a kid loses his mother, he goes through a whole heap of emotions. It is not natural for a child to lose their mother at such a young age.
Right.
This is an unnatural thing. Why? Because we believe in the phenomenon of life, of an everlasting life, of dying of old age. This is the dream of every person, pretty much, to live to their old and die of old age, healthy and in their sleep. If we could only wish life was that easy. But when a child loses their mother and has a sense of there is nothing else to lose, we have to look at this in particular child. Obviously, wherever his father is, he hasn't been mentioned.
Right, that's true.
His father has not been mentioned. So when
That's
his
true.
mother died, he moved in with a completely different family, completely different set of rules. At the end, after being expelled from school for fighting, but here it is, he comes back and shoots 28 people, 17 of which he killed.
Right.
It becomes, what is it that we're not seeing? And what is it that we're not seeing is everybody that spoke out about this child and knowing this child has said that this behavior and him getting picked on and getting bullied has been going on since the 6th grade. Now let's do the math. 6th grade, you're about 11. You get to 19. This is 8 years of torment that this man has been going through, and we don't know to what lengths his mother was comforting him.
Right.
We know that a lot of times the victims in a bully situation come home, they're comforted by mom or dad or whoever
Okay.
is around. So are we breeding it? Again, let's blame ourselves before we start blaming things that you don't have to have. You don't have to have rap music. You don't have to have video games. You don't have to have the violent movies. You don't have to go watch any of it or listen to any of it. You can drown yourself out. That is the right as an American citizen to have.
So people knew he was being bullied for years and no one stepped in and did anything.
And that is my point. But yet here I
But
is.
we want to, here's the end result of not stepping in with bullying.
Well, everybody has a breaking point, and we're not looking at that. Everybody has a breaking point. We actually have a saying because of the breaking point. You're going to go what? Postal. This was a known phenomenon long before this one child. Columbine didn't have this many deaths, but yet it was 2 people versus 1. This was not something that was not calculated. This was not something that he just woke up in the morning and said, I'm going to do. This is something that he knew he was going to do. But I'm looking at the root cause of how many years went by with nobody doing something. I believe one of the survivors even stated publicly that he was doing something in the 6th grade and her friend got up and punched him in the face. So I'm wondering what happened after that. Because it's always the story of the rabbit. Everybody wants to be the victim. Well, my father used to say it's no fun when the rabbit has the gun and you got to run. And I think that that's what we realizing is happening. He was the rabbit. Everybody else was the hunter. He was being chased, bullied, picked on, and the rabbit got the gun. And now it wasn't fun anymore because the rabbit was a good shot. Now, again, we're not condoning the violence and saying, hey, let's tell kids go out and shoot people. But what I am stating is this. If you want your kids to be safe, if you want your kids to go to school and say, okay, well, let's just make them prisoners and let's treat them like LA County schools and let's put metal detectors up and wrought iron bars and have undercover officers with guns and regular officers with guns walk around their school all day. And we just have them feel like inmates while they're at school. Or we can start telling our kids that, hey, sometimes the kid that's left out might be the kid you just need to say hello to. I'm not saying you got to befriend them and sit down and have a full lunch, but a simple hello
There's
does
nothing wrong with
change.
that.
Yeah, and it doesn't. But a simple hello may change just that person's day in that instant because it gives you an energy that lets you know, well, maybe they just need somebody to talk to.
Yeah, we preach inclusiveness, but I don't think we
don't live it.
We don't live it.
Not at all.
often
Not in any way,
enough.
shape, or form.
And I think inclusiveness could do go a long way to help curtail some of this down the road.
But
Well-
especially not in high school.
Yeah, there was one high school in some community. I don't remember where it was, but I was impressed. These kids formed, how they have clubs. They have chess club and they have whatever. These kids had a not alone club, so they would not let any kids eat alone in the cafeteria. So if there was a kid that was alone, then that was part of this club. That was their responsibility to go up and sit with this kid and talk, and show them that they didn't have to eat alone. So that was their whole focus. And I think that would go so far with so many of these kids that do feel ostracized in having them to just know that they're not alone. The other thing is, and we talked about this last week, is that it's okay to be different, and that's what the problem that we have is we haven't made it okay.
We certainly haven't. I mean, when you go to school, especially in early school, you want to fit in.
Right.
And if you don't, you are horribly picked on immediately.
Right.
And kids are sensitive. I'm wondering why, again, in a place where you have over 100,000 gangs, in one place, just in LA alone, you have over 100,000 gangs. So let's think about this. In the place that's supposed to be quote unquote the most dangerous place to go, the rap songs are about, and they glorify the behavior which goes on. We'll just even go to the lengths of saying the ghettos, if you will. Why is it that none of these schools have mass shootings?
Good
in
point.
the place where the kids are supposed to have the most guns, in the place where the most violence is supposed to take place, in the place where the gang wars is going on and kids are getting arrested, why is it that we're not seeing mass shootings in inner cities? It's because of the difference that the inner city kids are taught you have to have tough skin to survive life and the world around you. Period. Now we're seeing people get hit with stray bullets. We're seeing people get hit every other day. We're seeing a lot of different things take place, but the difference is kids are not coming to school shooting 10 or 15 or 17 different people. Why? It's because, again, the mentality that's taken in the inner cities is you're going to have to deal with whatever is around you because that's the way life is. You can't get mad. Again, we have a saying, you can't go postal. Why? Because going postal is the mass shooting. It is the epidemic of what we're going through. So let's not blame the video games because the video games, we could talk about Call of Duty. As a matter of fact, I believe that the video games are helping recruitment in the military because for the first time since 1997, the military is actually meeting their quota for recruitment. Could it be due to the video games? So would that be a positive or a negative, I would ask you?
Interesting point. Go ahead, Greg.
We don't have enough time in this segment to address that point, but you make some very, very valid points. If we stay focused on trying to get to the root cause of this shooting and video games being influenced, I would say that it is a contributing factor only in the sense that the mind does not know the difference between video games. And so the video games do cause a degree of post-traumatic syndrome.
Okay.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, there are studies that show that psychologically the mind cannot distinguish between real or fake trauma, and it affects your psyche the same.
You as a human being can decipher it though. Miss me with that mind and somebody getting some money.
It depends on the tools you have.
No, because once you become of a mature age and a thinking and functioning adult,
Once you become.
Exactly, and all the games that we're talking about are rated mature for a young adult.
Okay.
We're gonna wrap this up. Take a break. We'll finish this up in 2 sentences, and we'll go on to finance. We'll be right back with more of the Broad Perspective. Stay tuned.
BPN. Join the awakening.
The Broad Perspective Network is a portal designed to reveal a new perspective and reality to those who wish to know the truth about the world we live in and our role in it.
BPN. See beyond the illusion.
Welcome back to the Broad Perspective on the Broad Perspective Network. I'm Vivian Komori.
I'm Greg Barnes.
I'm Kevin Lawson.
And I'm Laura Feliz.
This is the concluding segment of today's show, and we're not ready to be done, but it's been interesting. In the last segment, we were talking about video games and not being able to distinguish between reality and not fantasy, but visual. When we see things visually, do we think it's real, or does our body react in that fashion? And there was some good discussion going on there. Greg and Kevin, I'm going to give you guys each a sentence, and then we got to get on to finance. So go for it.
Well, I was just going to say the whole point of that little bit of dialogue was that the mainstream media is trying to come to a rationality of what made this happen, and they're pointing the finger at guns, they're pointing the finger at video games,
Right.
and radical music, but there's so many more factors involved that are being ignored. This kid gave plenty of warning signs, and there are plenty of laws in place and institutions that already exist that should have acted on all of his warning signs that he gave out to prevent this from happening, and they failed. So what makes society think that, okay, well, I'll just make some new laws and that's going to fix
Right.
it? You have to
Exactly.
enforce and use the tools that you have already, and then you can worry about making
Right.
some new stuff
I
if
think
that's not
they're
working.
grabbing at straws because nobody knows. And I think
Exactly.
that here on this show, we're presenting probably a side that people haven't thought about. Go for it, Kevin.
I'd also like to point out that all the new laws that they make also affects the urban area, because all the shootings that they've had so far have pretty much been from registered owners or registered parents that
Yep.
have owned. These kids have had access to the firearms legally.
Right.
So the new laws that they're making are for those that hold the guns illegally in the strenuous process that you would have to go through illegally, whereas you do not have the opportunity to have the firearm if you're diagnosed with a psychiatric condition, or you're an ex-felon, or whatever the case may be. When we're talking about deciphering between real and fake, we could go around just at school alone and ask how many of those kids play Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, all the games that they could probably mention contribute to the violence. I guarantee you that the smell of carnage and that the actual sound of bullets and the smell of blood and the things that they saw, they now have probably real PTSD. As a matter of fact, I guarantee that those kids are suffering from PTSD, even if it's short term or long term.
Right.
Agreed.
I agree. I think that all of these are not fixes. I think that they could raise the age of buying a gun to 30. And it's still, because if I want a gun and I don't care how old I am, I'm going to get one.
Right.
I don't think it's going to make any difference.
Yeah.
I think it's just a Band-Aid. I think that the video game, the music bands, those are all Band-Aids. None of these things are going to change a darn thing. And that's my word on that. That's my final
You
take
sound
on
good
that.
for the politicians to get
Yeah,
reelected
exactly.
and get votes.
I'd
Yeah.
agree, because only 37% of our nation owns a firearm anyways. It's
Yeah.
just that they own so many that
Right.
they say man,
It
woman,
looks
and
like we've
child.
got a
But
lot, right.
statistically, it's only 37% of our
I
nation.
think it's even.
that
I think it's
owns
actually less than
a
that.
firearm.
But and I don't have an opinion one way or the other on any of it. I'm just saying it's not the solution. I just don't think it is. With that, we've got a few minutes left. We always want to talk about finance because there's a lot going on with that. Go ahead, Greg.
All right. I hope everyone is keeping a vigilant eye on what's happening in the bond market, because the Federal Reserve right now is at a crossroads. Minutes were just released from the latest FOMC meeting, and what they stated in that in those minutes was that they were going to continue to raise rates. Well, in raising rates, that affects real estate, that affects the bond market. It also affects gasoline prices. Those are all things that are inflationary in nature.
Right.
And that's not a good thing for those that have begun to accept the thought process that inflation is a good thing. Inflation means your cost of living expenses go up, but your wages are not going up with it, so you are walking backwards like Michael Jackson. It's not a good thing. Second thing I want to point out is that a new global event is in process, and that is the China oil futures market comes online March 26th. And what that means is that the world will now be able to purchase oil in the futures market, but in yuan instead of US dollars. So we've talked about the Petro Dollar for many years on the program here and the importance of it. That is the only thing besides consumer confidence that gives the US dollar any value on a global scale at all.
It's the
Is the
petrodollar.
fact that you have to buy US dollars in order to purchase oil. But now that they will have this alternative where they can purchase oil with yuans, the China dollar, that is a game changer on a global scale.
Is that going to influence the Middle East?
It is going to influence everything because new alliances are being formed where Saudi Arabia can sell oil now to China using yuans and not US dollars. So that creates trade wars as well as currency wars simultaneously, and both of those always lead to real wars, hot wars, okay, historically. So we are at a crossroads locally here in the United States with the Federal Reserve and their moves, as well as globally. And of course, we know that the stock market and the global economic system is all one now. Put your seatbelts on.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think this is going to be a major game changer. And I think that actually it's going to take precedence to anything else that we've ever talked about previously. This is extremely significant. You see, there's lots of things happening in the world, and we talk about those things on the broad perspective. But some of them, and they're all significant, but there are things that are literally game changers in the way we live. And this is one of them. This is definitely one of them that's going to, it has the potential, let me put it this way, it has the potential to totally upend our American way of life.
That is absolutely correct. But going back locally here, the crossroads of the Federal Reserve, if they raise rates, that is going to cause a recession. If they don't raise rates, then all of your retirements evaporate. We're at a quagmire. It is time to take control of your finances because the stock market, it crash that we experienced a couple weeks ago was just the beginning. Well, that little correction is fine, 10%, but to correct 10% in 2 days, that's what's abnormal about the whole thing. And that is going to continue to happen because the same conditions that made that happen are right here, right now. It didn't go anywhere. Everyone's just inhaling right now, but the exhale is on its way.
Okay, so what should we do?
The 5 B's, as I always say: beverages, beans, Band-Aids, bullets, and bullion to preserve your wealth, because the world as you know it is on its way to Venezuela, which, by the way, 1 ounce of gold is $1,300. That is 414,750 bolivars in Venezuela. And to put that in perspective, that's going to cost you, you get you a month's worth of utilities for that.
Wow. Okay, so I guess we better be paying attention.
Yes. Make sure you go to the Broad Perspective YouTube page and subscribe.
Ah, yes, thank you.
Get the broadcast there as well.
And it's our archives, yes, absolutely.
And make sure you like it and comment on the radio show.
We really appreciate that. Yeah, we just got our YouTube channel up and launched, and we're posting everything on there. We still have hundreds and hundreds of shows to get up and on there, but right now we're at least getting the current ones up. And so please subscribe. That helps us out a lot. We really appreciate it. We don't make money doing this. We spend a lot of time. We spend a lot of time in study and research, and we really do it because we want to be of service.
You can also post your questions and show topics that you may want to hear us talk about and explore. You can post that information there as well.
Very good. Yeah, we appreciate that.
In the comments section.
Exactly. In the meantime, we want to thank all of you for listening today, and join us same time, same place next week, where it's all perspective. Join us and broaden yours. Thanks for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed today's show. To keep programs like this and other programs on the Broad Perspective Network, go to thebroadperspective.com and click the donate button. We truly appreciate your support.